Marriage. Yes, that's what I had. Or at least, as far as I could tell, that was indeed the case. My wife Hilly and I tied the proverbial knot almost 20 years ago. In fact, I turned 20 years old in a few weeks, on December 10th, and I could honestly say that there wasn't much I could change to make our life together even better. We, of course, quarreled, but making up was always much more pleasant. That's just who we were. In our marriage, there was only one truly dark period, and that was in the second year. We both married young. I was 20, and Hilly was only 18, and we had been childhood sweethearts, living around the corner from each other. My older brother, Bob, had married her sister, Pam, the year before, and it seemed like the right decision. Our problem was that the other two had their first child within the first year, and we couldn't seem to. We got tested, both of us, even though the doctors told us we were worrying too much and should just let it happen. But the problem was Hilly's parents, or rather her mother, who kept telling us to start a family. Of course, their family was like that. And in addition to her sister Pam, Hilly had 3 other sisters. Jen, my mother-in-law, was desperate for a son, having been unable to give birth to one herself. And, of course, Bob and Pam's first child was another girl. Pressure. The test results turned out to be rather inconclusive. Hilly was fine, but for me, the amount of active material was a little low or something like that. I still didn't understand anything. The doctors assured us that it was nothing serious, that everything was fine, that we just needed to be patient, and that our first child would decide for himself when to come. We endured, but that didn't mean our marriage wasn't under strain. Luckily, as it turned out, we didn't have to wait too long, and in the 3rd year of our marriage, Hilly gave birth, just as the doctor promised. Linda is a beautiful baby in every way, but just one more girl. This at least put our fears to rest as to whether we would be able to have a child or not. And from then on, things calmed down and our marriage became perfect and continued that way. No doubt because we were more relaxed, Hilly soon became pregnant again and Tom was finally born. Yes, boy, and the whole family was in 7th heaven. Don't get the impression that girl children were ignored or loved less, but the first son in the family simply made everything special. Well, I did it first, I boasted to my older brother, but he just smiled back at me and told me to give him time. Well, he got it, and sure enough, the next year their first son was born, and I'd be damned if 8 months later we didn't have another one we named Mike. Just like on buses, isn't it? You wait forever, and then a whole bunch of them come at once. Probably because we were 2 brothers and 2 sisters, we all lived like one big happy family. Even when Hilly's other sisters got married, they were simply drawn there. It was great for the kids, and of course, none of us ever lacked a babysitter when we needed one. As far as I know, other couples were as happy as Hilly and I were, simply enjoying the wonders of a simple married life with a loving family nearby. There were a few other mishaps too, like when Bob had an accident at work and I had to be practically tethered next to him while he was slowly transfused with my blood. He dealt with it, and of course, I was no worse for it, often joking brotherly that now we were truly blood brothers. As our 20th anniversary approached, we were wondering how to celebrate. Bob and Pam had celebrated their anniversary the year before, and everyone had enjoyed getting together so much that we decided to do much the same and booked a private room at a local hotel for a large gathering of family and friends. By then, Linda was a very beautiful girl of 17, younger and perhaps even more beautiful than her mother, with luxurious dark brown hair and huge green eyes that attracted attention whenever she looked in your direction. They were built the same way, both slender, with beautiful legs and other advantages that perhaps the father should not focus too much on. Of course, she had a whole series of boyfriends, and one or another was constantly appearing in the house, but she had a reasonable head on her shoulders, so we just went with the flow. Tom, I always thought, was a little more like me, stronger build, and that suited him. He loved rugby as much as Bob and I did at his age, and at nearly 16 he was already playing regularly as a halfback for his school's first team. And young Mike, the youngest, well, He may have been going through a rough patch, and without being as good at sports as Tom, or for that matter as popular as Linda, poor Mike was having a rough time. Nothing serious. He was very smart, perhaps even smarter than the other two, and did very well in school. He just acted like a completely normal, completely incomprehensible teenager. On that day. Perhaps I should have been more understanding that day. Perhaps I should have ignored the mess he left on the dining room table. Maybe I should have just cleaned up after him. But did I remove it? No. You're not leaving until you clean up this mess, Mike, I told him firmly. I'll do it later, he replied gloomily. You do it now, Mike, I insisted. Why are you always picking on me? He shouted back, losing his composure. I'm not being picky, I told him sharply. You are a member of this family and will abide by our rules just like the rest. Who will force me? Mike almost cried, truly losing his composure. I am, I snapped, starting to lose patience. I am your father, and you will do what I say. Is that you, my father? He shouted back. Are you sure about this? I stopped suddenly, my next line still locked in my throat, shocked by what he had just said. Sorry, Dad. Mike jumped up, with a pained expression on his face. Sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to say that. I'll sort everything out right now. With these words, he turned away from me and rummaged around the table, collecting books and other things that he had left there. A few minutes later, the all was clear, and he stormed out of the room without another word, leaving me in my own world, wondering if this world was going to come crashing down on me. The problem, of course, was that Mike was and always was different from the other two. More trainable, more serious, but less outgoing than his older siblings. I often wondered why he was so different, and even discussed it with Hilly. But she just shrugged and said it was just my imagination. Is it so? Was I like this? What prompted Mike to make this remark? If he had just shouted it in anger and walked away, I would have been angry with him, but that would have been the end of it. But he apologized so quickly and retracted the remark. Why? What did he know that I didn't know? Oh shit, I really didn't want to think about the thoughts that were running through my restless brain at that moment. My first reaction was to rush out to find Hilly and demand to know what she had done. But what would this lead to? What would I say? I couldn't possibly just go and accuse her of having sex with some other guy behind my back. If that was the case, she would simply deny it. And if not, then how could she forgive me for doubting her? Besides, this was 16 years ago or more. But does this change anything? Is it really still going on? My stomach felt sick. I wanted to be sick, and I still didn't know if I had any reason to worry. Oh God, what a terrible day it was. Blood types. This is it, I thought. And without further ado, I went into our office and sorted out the children's medical records. Linda, Tom, and Mike. All O+, which, after donating blood to my brother, I knew was the same as mine. I felt a wave of relief wash over me until it occurred to me that blood types don't tell the whole story. If Mike had been different, then it would have been one thing. But the fact that they were all of the same group could have just been a coincidence and did not confirm that he was really my own son. Oh my God, what to do? Test DNA? I couldn't believe that such a thought had occurred to me, and that one careless comment from an angry son had thrown me off balance. I panicked for no good reason, but when that night at dinner, Mike couldn't see my eyes throughout the entire meal, I started to worry again. And when he jumped out from the table without saying a word to anyone, I got really worried. What happened to Mike? Hilly asked, also noticing his strange behavior. I have no idea, I replied, shrugging. Do you children have any ideas? They both shook their heads, probably not even noticing anything strange. Was he upset about something? I asked, but they just shook their heads. After waiting for the two teenagers to leave the table, I worked up the courage to question my wife a little. Mike is so different from the other two, Hilly, I began. Any ideas why this might be? Oh, let's not repeat this topic, Davy, she replied, standing up to put away the dishes. He's not that different. He's just a little deeper than the other two. End of conversation. Was this done intentionally, or was she genuinely indifferent to it? I really didn't know. test DNA? Why not find out about it? And 20 minutes later, I was already Googling it on the internet. An hour later, my head was full of facts and figures, but to be honest, I wasn't much wiser. It wasn't until Monday morning that I found the name of the laboratory that performed the test. It took me almost an hour to find it, and no doubt my secretary would have done it much faster. But how do you explain to your secretary why you need him? Exactly. That's why I decided to do it myself. They could do it, they had no problems, but it was expensive, especially if you wanted results as quickly as I did. But I had to know before I risked my marriage. Was Mike my son or not? When I told them I had 3 children, they offered to send me samples of each of them to cross-check with one of my own. Have you ever tried to get even one hair from your adult children? Not easy, let me tell you. And with Mike continuing to avoid me at every opportunity, this was the hardest of all. However, I managed, sent them away, and waited. Now I just had to wait for information whether Mike was my son. Over the next week, Mike seemed to calm down again, perhaps relieved that I had not confronted him about his outburst. We almost got to the point where I felt like I could broach the subject gently, but I decided it was best to wait for the results, since I was going down that path. My wife, of course, continued to be her usual loving self, and nothing else seemed to change in our daily routine. I can't say that it was the most enthusiastic sex I've had these few days, but I didn't refuse it. Doubts gnawed at me inside, and although I tried my best to hide it from Hilly, I simply could not have sex with her without wondering who else could have done it in the 20 years of our marriage. One evening, I was having dinner with my brother and his wife, and when we were alone, I almost confessed my fears to him. He and I were very similar in almost every way, so if anyone else was Mike's father, then reason told me it couldn't be him. My God, why did I even think that? Have I really become that paranoid already? However, something stopped me. I didn't have to burden him with my doubts, and after all, I was confident that he would be there for me if the results turned out to be bad. I remained calm. He was silent. I was so quiet that Hilly asked me if I was okay a couple of times. "I'm fine," he answered her. "I just have a few things on my mind." She looked worried for a moment, but didn't question me. "The results have arrived. I asked them to be delivered to my office in case Hilly arrived before me and opened the letter. I read it with trembling hands, trying to understand what it all meant. Did this piece of paper really mean the end of my marriage? I read it. As far as I could tell, Mike's results matched mine well, and I felt relaxed, even though I still didn't understand it all. You probably already guessed that medical terms are a complete mess for me. In fact, the entire report was full of good matches and close matches, so it seemed like the whole thing was a storm in a teacup. What a damn relief. I felt tears welling up in my eyes and thanked the heavens for not telling Hilly about my fears. I decided to make it up to her that evening, maybe invite her to dinner and then to... After rereading the cover letter, which I hadn't paid much attention to, I saw that the lab wanted me to call them and discuss the results. I guess it was just an excuse to make more money off of me, and I thought, should I bother? "Hello, this is Davy Jones," I said when the phone answered. Dr. Hoskins asked me to call him. After giving the woman some recommendations and so on, I was eventually connected with the good doctor. "Hello, Mr. Jones," he greeted me. "Have you had the opportunity to familiarize yourself with the results that we sent you?" "Yes," I answered confidently. "If I understand correctly, it seems that my fears about my son Mike were unfounded." "Yes, but I'm afraid it's not quite that simple," he blurted out, and the floor seemed to disappear from under me as I waited for him to destroy my world. "Are you saying that he is not my son?" I muttered back to him. "That's not the point, Mr. Jones," he continued. "The odds that he is not your offspring are less than 1,000,000 to 1. I would bet my entire reputation on the fact that he is your own son." "So Mike is my real son," I answered with relief. "Yes, Mr. Jones." "What's the problem then?" I continued hesitantly. What else could be wrong? By that time, I was already very worried because I had read somewhere that DNA testing could detect genetic diseases and the like. Was Mike sick? Maybe one of us has something terrible? What was he going to tell me? "These are the other 2 samples you sent," the doctor told me seriously. The ones your son's brother and sister have? Yes. What's wrong with them? I asked, starting to panic. Is there something wrong with one of them? Well, it appears they are only half-siblings of your youngest son, Mr. Jones. Half-brothers and sisters? I hissed at him. What does this mean, doctor? What are half-siblings? That means, Mr. Jones, he continued, that it is very unlikely that you are their real father. I dropped the phone, and the next thing I knew, I came with a group of my work colleagues around me. Give him some air, I heard someone call to me as I slowly came to my senses, fighting for my breath. Are you okay, Davy? Another voice asked, and I nodded my head, trying to get to my feet. They helped me, and I found myself sitting in my chair with people behind me, muttering about how hot it was in the office and how stressed they were all under due to the workload. What nonsense. If only they knew. They got someone to drive me home, telling me to take the day off. I was grateful that the house was empty when I arrived. Hilly was at her part-time job and the kids were at school. I had to do it. I really didn't want to do this, but I had to. With trembling fingers, I dialed the lab number again, and a few moments later, I was talking to the doctor again, apologizing for cutting off the call earlier. Sorry, Mr. Jones, he said. I should have warned you in advance, but we only work with mail, and this is sometimes very difficult. I told him I knew there was nothing wrong with me, and he went over the test results with me again. Mike was definitely mine. Linda and Tom were hardly my children. But the results say that all the matches were good or close, doctor, I pleaded. Could there be some kind of mistake? If we only had one sample, he explained carefully, we could very well ask for another sample for testing. But with two samples, it's almost 100% certain. These two are full brother and sister, but I'm afraid it's unlikely that you are their father. But you said they were close, I repeated, desperately clinging to a thin thread of hope. What does it mean? Do you have a twin, Mr. Jones? He asked cautiously. Or maybe brother. My brother, I exclaimed excitedly. What the hell does he have to do with it? You must draw your own conclusions, Mr. Jones, the doctor continued. If you could get your brother's sample, we could test it. But I didn't listen anymore. My little ideal world really ended abruptly. What to do about it? Did I want to end my marriage? Did I want to end my relationship with my only brother? You can cancel your wife, but you definitely can't cancel your brother. Maybe it's better to continue living as if I don't know anything. Continue to live a pathetic lie. I could not. Anyway, what about Mike? He knew something, that's for sure. But it seemed like he was on the wrong end of the stick. Of course, I will see my son Mike in a different light from then on. But will I love Linda and Tom any less? I couldn't imagine what I would be. How could I? They were my children, and no piece of paper could change that. What about Hilly? That was the question. What about this bitch? And my damn brother, for that matter. And Pam, my sister in misfortune. What's wrong with her? How will she take the news? How will the rest of the family take the news? Too many questions were spinning in my head. Oh God, this was all so difficult, and I didn't feel ready for the challenge. I remember walking out the front door and starting to walk down the street, but the next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital with bandages on my arms. I fell under a car while completely drunk, but I didn't know it at the time. Davy, are you okay? I looked back to see who asked the question, but it hurt. It hurts like hell. It dawned on me and I realized that it was my ex-wife talking to me. No, not yet anyway. She was still my wife. I didn't say anything, at least nothing significant. I just didn't know what to say. What about, "Hi, honey. I just found out that the two kids aren't mine and that you cheated on me with my brother. Did you have a good day? What's for dinner?" Doesn't sound quite right, does it? In any case, it turned out that my injuries were far from life-threatening, and I was sent home the next day. However, there was nothing I could do to help myself, so I stalled while I had to rely on Hilly for help. It gave me time to think, time to plan. However, time was wasted, and I still didn't know what to do. But somehow Mike and the other two kids seemed to be the main problem. Whatever I decided had to be in their best interests, even if my interests were to suffer. From now on, Hilly's interests will come last. All I knew was that our 20th wedding anniversary was approaching, and the room was booked for a big dinner. By this time, everything should be settled. Within a week or so, I was more or less back to normal, at least physically, and everything seemed to go back to normal while I wondered what to do, except for Mike, who seemed to be in danger of going off the rails and was just the right age to do so. "You'll have to talk to him, Davy," Hilly said late one evening. "I don't know what's wrong with him. It seems he doesn't want to talk to me anymore." "I'll talk to him," I promised. "Any idea what's wrong with him?" she asked. "Eat. Some," I answered briefly. "Do you want to discuss them with me, Davy?" "Not really," I replied, which somewhat discouraged her. The opportunity presented itself the next day when I found him alone in his room, and unless he pushed me out of the way, he would not be able to avoid me. "Do you want to talk about what's bothering you, son?" I began softly. He just shook his head, didn't want to talk. "Maybe it has something to do with that day, Mike." I nudged him. "Oh, well, about our relationship." Mike looked at me and I couldn't help but notice the tear in his eye. Suddenly, he began to look older than his tender years. "You don't know Dad, do you?" He challenged me. "I may know more than you think, son," I answered him, trying to keep a smile on my face. "Then why don't you do something about it, Dad?" he whined. "Why do you let them get away with everything? Wait! Things weren't going the way I thought. It's not like we're talking about the same thing." "Get away with what, son?" "What the hell else could I say?" "You really don't know, Dad," he repeated. "Apparently not, son," I was forced to admit. "This is Mom and Uncle Tim, Dad," he told me, in no more than a whisper. "When you're at work, once a month or so, this is fucking embarrassing." Uncle Tim. Blimey. Tim was the husband of Anne, another one of Hilly's damn sisters. "Oh, that," I muttered pathetically, not knowing what else to say. "They've been doing this for years, Dad," my son told me. "Linda thinks I'm Tim's son, not yours." At this point, he broke down and cried, and I wrapped my arms around him to comfort him. It had been a long time since I had done this, and I was surprised at how big and strong my little boy felt. "I can absolutely guarantee you, Mike," I consoled him, continuing to hug him. "You are my son in every way, not Tim's." "How do you know, Dad?" He sobbed. "How can you be sure?" "I'm sure, son," I told him firmly. "Believe me, I'm sure." We chatted for a while, and, without giving too much away, I convinced him of fatherhood, and it was like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. However, there was no mention of my brother being the father of 2 other children, and I discovered that my ideal family was not as happy and content as I had believed. Both Linda and Tom knew about their mother's affair with their uncle, but, not knowing what to do about it, they chose to simply turn a blind eye to it. What a terrible situation you can put your own children in. But Tim? Lord. His wife Anne was the youngest of 4 sisters, and, without a doubt, the most beautiful of them all. Hilly was attractive enough, but Anne? Another blow was struck to the heart of my so-called perfect marriage with Hilly. A few days later, I took all 3 kids to dinner and did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I told them. I told them everything I found out. Damn it all. I had no idea how they would react, but they took it well. Linda cried a little, and Tom sat with his heat in his hands. All 3 of them wanted to go and meet their mother right away, but I convinced them to wait, as I had some business to take care of first. All 3 of them swore their love and devotion to me, and were close to refusing to ever see Hilly again. I, of course, talked them out of it, reminding them that no matter what she did, she was still their mother and took excellent care of them all their lives. I talked about her in terms I didn't really feel, especially when the children told me their story. Hilly, my loving wife, apparently had a relationship with her brother-in-law Tim for some time, but probably not really long enough to be Mike's father. Once a month might also be a big exaggeration, but to be honest, none of us knew that. The only thing I knew was that the children were so grateful to be told all this, and all 3 of them cried, and even Tom when we gathered together at the end of the evening. I'll correct the last statement. All 4 of us were crying. I needed to get revenge, but in a way that wouldn't cause grief to my children. And yes, I use that term with caution. I mean my children. I thought for a long time, but could not come up with any spectacular act of revenge. It should have just been a direct confrontation. At least I had an event where I could do it. The family gathered, as a family should. My parents by that time had already died, and Bob and I were quite late children. That evening at the celebratory dinner, there were 39 of us, mostly members of the Hilly family and their families, but there were also other friends of ours. Dinner was good. At least that's what they told me, and as for me, I could eat cardboard and drink water. Time for speeches. Began. End? Maybe it's a start. I was sweating profusely and taking long, deep breaths to calm myself. What I had to do was not easy, but it had to be done. We welcome all our family and friends, I began, and for a few moments continued talking about unimportant things. Now, let's celebrate 20 years of marriage to my wife, Hilly. I finally finished. There are some very interesting, even intimate and personal things about my marriage to my dear wife that I want to tell you all about. There was some giggling around the large table and one or two rude comments about our supposed sex life. Hilly blushed. They all thought I was joking, but how wrong they were. When the laughter died down, first Linda stood up from her seat and headed out of the dining room, followed by Tom and then Mike. They didn't say a word to anyone, and the whole table watched their backs in amazement, not understanding what was happening. "You three, come back here," Hilly shouted angrily, jumping to her feet. "Don't be so rude to your father." Only Tom responded, turning to look at his mother for a moment and shaking his head in displeasure before joining his brother and sister outside. "Davy," my wife shouted to me, "do something! Tell them to come back immediately." "It's okay, honey," I told her very firmly. "They already know what I'm going to say, and since it concerns the three of them, maybe it would be better if they weren't here." Hilly's mouth opened in surprise. First out of surprise at how I responded to her demand, and then out of concern, as her mind must have been running through all the possible reasons for my behavior. "Sit down, Hilly," I told her, my tone leaving no doubt that I was not to be trifled with. "As I said," I continued, looking at the people around me, "I had 20 wonderful years of marriage, a perfect marriage, or so I thought until a couple of weeks ago." I paused for effect, and the atmosphere around the table became electric. Some looked puzzled, others were still smiling, expecting a joke, but some of them were very worried, including a few people that surprised me. "Imagine my surprise," I continued when no one said anything, "to find out that Linda, my beloved Linda, is not actually my own daughter. Oh my God," Hilly sobbed quietly, covering her face with her hands, the only one who made a sound. "Would you like to tell everyone who Linda's real father is, Hilly?" I asked her, but she was silent, only sobbing loudly, the only sound that broke the complete silence around me. "Okay then," I continued. "Anyone else want to tell everyone who Linda's father is? Anyone else want to tell everyone who had sex with my wife behind my back?" No one spoke, and I just stood there, glaring at the family and friends around me. As terrible as it was, in some strange way, I took a strange pleasure in teasing the people who were deceiving me. None of them knew how much I had found out. I couldn't help but give my brother Bob a particularly stern look, and he visibly sank under my gaze, realizing that the game was over. "So no one is going to confess?" I asked them. "Do I have to tell everyone who it is?" Then I was surprised, and it was a surprise when Bob's wife, Pam, jumped to her feet. "It's not what you think, Davy," she screamed in suffering. "It wasn't a dirty affair or anything like that. It was just sex a few times to get Hilly pregnant. The whole family was desperate for a boy, especially the mother, and you seemed incapable of fathering a child. Fortunately, at that moment, no one hit me with the proverbial feather. Otherwise, I would definitely have been knocked down. She knew. She knew damn well. Pam knew that her husband, my brother, was the father of my daughter." I looked around the table and saw that it was divided into two camps, friends who didn't know and family who mostly seemed to know. While I stood and tried to come to my senses, my friends, one after another, stood up, made excuses, and embarrassedly left, leaving 17 or 18 of us, all family members. "Go play over there," said Julie, one of Hilly's sisters, and one by one, the younger children were led out of the way. The teenagers were also told to disappear, but it was like EastEnders. Coronation Street and Neighbors rolled into one, and none of them budgeted. Fair. You knew damn well, didn't you? I exclaimed, looking around. You all know about this damn fiasco, except maybe the children. A couple of the husbands looked a little confused, but otherwise no one denied it. Listen, Davy, said my brother. It's not what it seems, to be honest. He wanted to add another stupid comment, but my look of hatred silenced him. So you all knew that Bob had sex with my loving wife and was Linda's father? I demanded from those sitting at the table. No one said yes, but then again, no one denied it. It only happened 3 times, Davy, Pam said again. Enough to get her pregnant. Whose damn idea was this? I shouted out loud to them, my temper starting to flare up. Again, no one said anything, but there were simply too many glances directed at Jen, my mother-in-law. I could have guessed. Thank you, Mom, I solemnly told her. Your desperate desire to have a son in the family cost me my marriage. No, Hilly cried, finally deciding to take part. Please don't say that, Davy. You can't say that. I couldn't live without you. Of coursey, you can only forgive me for one mistake. One mistake? I asked her. Just one mistake? Of course, honey, Hilly sobbed. It was just one time. It seems terrible now, but when Mom planned it all years ago, it all seemed logical. What about Tom, then? Well, of course he's yours, Davy, she whined. What do you mean? Wrong, I told her. I did a DNA test, and his father is the same man as Linda's father. The atmosphere at the table immediately changed. What are you saying, Davy? Pam exclaimed in surprise. You heard me, Pam, I told her. If my ever-loving brother is Linda's father, then he is also Tom's father. Silence. This information was obviously new to everyone at the table, or at least to most of them. You're a bastard, Bob, Pam said to her husband, as realization dawned. You promised me, and then you went back to have fun with that bitch? Bob simply lowered his head, wishing he was somewhere else. And you, bitch, Pam yelled at Hilly. I agreed to let you have my husband for just 1 week, and you decided that he is now yours? With these words, she took 3 steps towards her sister and hit Hilly in the face with all her might. She scolded Hilly, hitting her again and again, only stopping and bursting into tears when one of the others pulled her away from her little sister. Happy mom, huh? I spat at Jen, but all she did was stare at me into space. So who else was entertaining my wife behind my back? I asked when no one else spoke, looking straight at Tim, who was sitting on the other side of the table from me. You bastard! Julie shouted next to me. This got me hooked, too. So it's true what they told me that night, isn't it, bastard? You actually had sex with her that night at the party. Tim wasn't even a very good liar or very clever that evening, failing to dodge his wife Anne's fist when she punched him in the nose. Don't come back to our house tonight, Anne shouted at her husband. And in general, never come back. That goes for you too, Pam told Bob. I'm divorcing you and I never want to see you again. The 3 offended sisters held hands and headed towards the door. You are not our sister, they shouted in Hilly's face, breaking free. Are you happy now, Jen? I asked my mother-in-law, but the expression on her face did not change. She sat and looked straight ahead, and Hilly continued to sob in her arms. Sorry, Davy. Alf, my father-in-law, finally intervened. If I knew... He paused, lost for words, but he was the only one of these bastards who made any effort to apologize. Then Brother Bob walked around the table and came to me, holding out his hands, with an expression of extreme shame on his face. Davy, he coughed. Davy, what can I say? Nothing, bastard, I spat in response, and without much force I swung at him and hit my brother right in the chin. The force might not be great, but the timing was perfect, and he stumbled backwards, tripping over a chair and sprawling on the floor, and was in no hurry to get up. I guess you could say that, at this point, the party broke up. The fun seemed to have gone out the whole evening. That evening, Hilly never returned home, and in fact, other than to pick up a few things, she never came home again. The children refused to talk to her for some time after that, but no matter how much I hated her, I had to think about the long-term well-being of the children. Eventually, they came to their senses and accepted her back into their lives, but not in the same way as before. I was the dad, and she, well, I think she became more like a favorite aunt. The whole family fell apart. Two of the three sisters who left that night got divorced, and only Pam remained with Bob, although she gave him a hell of a dressing down, deciding that what was good for the goose was good for the goose. Pam came over a couple of evenings later when the kids were out, and it quickly became clear what was on her mind. Whether it was revenge for her or a desire to take revenge on me, I never knew. But I received payback. There was no love, no compassion, and we just had revenge sex for hours. It was weird, just like sex with my wife, but different. After that, she thanked me and left, and I only found out a few months later that she had become a habit, slowly going through Bob's friends until she had slept with almost all of them. Will their marriage survive? I don't know, and I didn't care. Not my problem, but I must feel damn sorry for that damn brother. 3 weeks later, one of the sisters, Anne, who was pretty, called me and invited me to dinner. I went, we ate, talked, romanticized, kissed, and ended up in bed. But this time, everything was different, and after the initial passions, we made love, and it was again like my early days with Hilly. I don't know why Tim neglected his marriage, but it certainly had nothing to do with Anne's sexual appetite. The sweetest pill, perhaps, was when Alf, the long-suffering husband of my ex-mother-in-law Jen, decided that he had had enough of her interference, bought a 12-meter yacht, and spent the rest of his active life sailing around Europe. I, and sometimes the children, spent a week or two sailing with him, and places like the south of France, La Rochelle, and the Canaries became familiar to us. Linda married a young Spaniard whom she met while sailing, and whose family owned, perhaps, the largest yacht marina in Europe. This came in handy, too. The two boys are still playing on the field, perhaps being warned against marrying too early, as their father did. They had time. And I don't see Hilly, but the children tell me that she lives day by day and often asks about me. The kids tell me, but I just grumble. Oh, and I'm thinking about trying my hand at the perfect marriage again. But this time, with Anne. I think we love each other, but we're both still a little wary. Let's see. I want to make sure I don't marry Anne just to spite Hilly, but I'd like to see her face if I did. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. Jody Morgan moved into the house opposite our street when she was 14 years old. For a 15-year-old boy, it was love at first sight. There was no meet cute. From the very beginning, it seemed like we were destined to be together forever, but enough sentimentality. What really connected us was our shared love of adventure. We constantly needed to do something. Not some everyday things, but extraordinary ones. As a child, it started with things like climbing very tall trees or exploring caves, diving off local bridges and painting water towers. It seemed like nothing was off limits as long as it stayed within the law, although a lot of it was walking on the edge, if you know what I mean. Her favorite expression was, "You always regret what you didn't do." We barely made it through high school without killing ourselves. I finished school first and got a good job laying bricks. Our school had a construction vocational training program, and I took full advantage of it. Jody finished school a year late. She completed a nursing training program and was quickly hired by one of the local ambulance services. 6 months later, Jody Morgan became Mrs. John Terrell. Our extracurricular activities have slowed down a lot, but they haven't disappeared. The excitement we lacked outside the house we made up for in the bedroom. When it came to sex, everything was on the menu. We worked hard. We saved money and bought a house. After the birth of our third son, Jody quit her job. Life was good. I had 6 people working for me, and there was more work than we could handle. Only one problem still existed. Jody began to regret it. "John, we have to do something." "With what? Everything seems to be fine. Are the boys okay?" The boys are fine for now. I'm worried about us. We're stuck. If we don't do something, we'll take root and won't be able to move anymore. This is a damn exaggeration, but I understand what you want to say. Any suggestions? The boys are 8, 9, and 10 years old. I think they're old enough to do this with us. We'll have to adapt a little to get them involved, but I think it could be fun. It doesn't have to be all the time. But we have to do something. I don't want them to regret not doing something when they were young. We didn't regret it. Jody didn't appreciate it when I started laughing. What the hell is so funny, John? You speak the same way as 20 years ago. Is this the legacy that you are going to leave to your sons? Why not? I think it would be nice to instill this in them. I don't want them to grow up like logs. And that's all? No, I want this for myself too. There are a hell of a lot of things we haven't done yet. We can afford it, and we have time. Your guys will be able to cover for you when you need to go away. Okay, I agree. Let's light it up. That's what they're saying now? For the next couple of years, we were constantly on the move. It wasn't continuous, but fairly regular. When one trip was over, Jody was already planning the next 1 or 2. We all loved whitewater rafting, and it opened a few doors for us. We made 2 trips to the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. We tried bungee jumping and zip lines. We ended up with 5 kayaks. After receiving scuba diver certificates, even more opportunities opened up for us. We tried hot air ballooning, but found it boring. Jody and I did a tandem skydive. 10 years have passed. Terry, our oldest son, joined the Air Force. Greg became a scuba diving instructor, and Robert, the youngest, became a truck driver. Jody and I were left alone. Everything seemed to slow down. I spent more time at work, and Jody spent more time on the internet. Jody returned to work. For several months, everything was quiet. John. Yes. I'm starting to get a little worried. What exactly does this mean? I need to do something. There's a lot going on at work right now. Maybe this can wait a little? I guess so. Actually, I thought maybe for a change I could do something on my own. You mean alone? Not really. I thought maybe with one of the girls from work. I never went anywhere without you, so it would be at least some variety. Is there anything specific in mind? No. Sarah and I talked a little about it, but haven't decided anything yet. Is this Sarah Harlow? Yes. You saw her at some picnics. Is this the one who was divorced twice? Jody hesitated. Yes, but that's not a problem. Why did it happen? Sorry, I thought you would judge. The fact that she is divorced does not make her a bad person. I never said that, and I'm sorry if that's how you interpreted it. So you don't mind? Of course. Have I ever refused you anything? Thank you, thank you. I felt uneasy. All the trips and vacations that Jody planned were somehow connected with her mantra. I knew it. I just needed to understand how it applies in this case. She will do something so that she doesn't regret not doing it later. There's a lot of negativity there. All I had to do was figure out what she was going to do. Over the years, the business has developed well. In addition to laying brick, we also did a lot of block masonry and poured concrete foundations. We didn't do driveways or sidewalks, just foundations and poured walls. The company was also involved in the construction of steel buildings. These were usually simple, prefabricated buildings, but some were quite large. I now have over 50 full-time employees. I never asked Jody what she was planning. The fact that she didn't openly say what it would be made me a little uneasy. I'm sure she had something on her mind. My concerns increased significantly when I discovered that it deletes the browser history every time. I think most guys would have easily gotten around this problem, but I wasn't that smart. I didn't even know what a keylogger was. She also deleted her email correspondence, but that's where she screwed up. Jody was putting her letters in the trash, but she didn't realize that they stayed in the trash for 30 days unless she emptied the trash every time. I started looking through her letters over the past month. Most of it was just plain junk, but the correspondence she had with Sarah was enlightening. The words were enough to confirm my suspicions, but the accompanying web links did the trick. I did not check all the sites that were linked to. This was not necessary. It's time to make a decision I won't regret. It was a Tuesday fair in Buca. I felt like a new kid at school. This was my first time going out, although I had been here for 2 days already. I wandered around for a while and finally found my assigned coffee shop. Being old school, I ordered a regular black coffee. It was still early and people were just starting to arrive, so I took one of the still empty seats. I felt weird wearing a New York Yankees cap, but that was one of the conditions given to me. "Hey, new guy! Welcome to Bouquet! You must be Mickey, right?" My greeter was also wearing a Yankees cap. I seemed to half rise to greet him, but he motioned for me to sit back down and did the same. "Ted Williams. Always a pleasure to meet a fellow ball player." He shook my hand vigorously. We both laughed a little at the inappropriate ball player reference. I thought it was a joke, but I had a feeling that a lot of people knew about it. How many players are we talking about?" "At the moment, it looks like there are 10 baseball players and 3 tennis players." "Tennis. The baseball players are all boys, but there are 3 other girls in the program, and Hector decided that tennis was better for them." "Are they all here?" "All but one. Chris Evert lives in David." That's when Sandy Koufax and Bob Feller joined us. Before the morning was over, I met 4 more famous ball players. Bob quickly got to the point. "So, Mr. Mickey Mantle, in 25 words, no more, tell us why you decided to choose Panama Promotions Alternatives." From the way the question was phrased, I guessed that no one wanted the gruesome details, just a quick overview. My wife of 23 years decided she wanted to spread her wings, and I decided I didn't want to stand in her way, so I left. Yogi Bear was the first to respond. It was more than 25 words. Ted poked him in the ribs. Over the next 20 minutes, each of the guys talked about the reasons for their participation in the program. They were almost all different, but the results were the same. 10 boys and 3 girls signed up for PPA to avoid unwanted situations at home. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't foolproof. Basically, we got a new name, a new driver's license, and a new bank account. Unfortunately, we were still U.S. citizens and had to pay taxes in our old names. All except Joe DiMaggio, who was from Canada. If someone really wanted to find us, they could do it. In all, heroes received new names identical to the names of famous athletes. Hector Ruiz organized Panama Promotions Alternatives so that people in our situation would have at least some option to disappear without going to extremes. It wasn't a Black Ops type system. In fact, it was quite loose. Hector was an avid baseball fan. Everything wasn't exactly kosher, but it was buttered up enough for us to feel comfortable. The name change was properly completed and the driver's license and bank accounts were in order. Using them was not easy, but quite doable. It was almost noon when my cell phone rang. I haven't had time to buy a new one yet. The whole team watched me. Read the message. AIR Jamaica Flight 247 landed at Philadelphia International Airport from Montego Bay. I looked at my companions and smiled. "Gentlemen, my wife has just returned home from a 10-day vacation." That night, we all went to the Rock for some ribs. I spent the next few months getting to know the area. There was always 1 or 2 team members nearby for communication and assistance. I notified all 3 boys of the situation, but without details. Their mother could explain everything to them. Hector insisted that all PPA participants carry emergency suitcases with the most necessary things in case of a sudden departure. Both Barry Bonds and Willie Mays had to use their briefcases at some point. Barry was being tracked by his irritated wife, and Willie was being looked for by his 2 brothers-in-law. They were more than happy to recommend items that I should have with me if needed. The need arose sooner than I expected. The phone rang at 5 a.m. Who the hell would be calling at a time like this? "Mr. Mantle, this is Hector. The driver will be with you in 30 minutes. Prepare everything you need and be prepared to stay at least a week, maybe longer. Don't tell anyone anything. I'll take care of everything." There wasn't really much to do. I had plenty of time to shower and shave and still be ready to leave. Luckily, the driver had brought some cornmeal tortillas with him. An hour later, we were in David. Chris Evert was waiting with an emergency suitcase when we pulled up. I have no idea why she chose David over Boke. When we drove south, the temperatures were completely different. She didn't look like a tennis player at all. Of course, I didn't look like a baseball player either. She looked more like a Mediterranean type. We introduced ourselves, and she began to get settled. She had already had breakfast, and I ate her scones. "Do you have any idea where we're going?" I shook my head. "No." "Don't you know why?" I pretended to be ignorant again. She had a dejected expression on her face and sat silently for the rest of the ride. 30 minutes later, we arrived at a small pier. I had no idea where we were. I know absolutely nothing about sailboats. I only know that the one we found ourselves on was medium in size. After unloading us and our bags, the driver smiled, waved, and drove off. The boat was called the Yankee Clipper. I thought it was ironic. The captain, Jamie Ruiz, was Hector's cousin. His assistant was a young local girl named Marisol. It turned out that he steered the ship and she took care of everything else. I had no idea what we would do or how much we would be charged for this service, but it didn't matter. Our things were stowed in the back cabin and we gathered on deck to drink coffee and eat some biscuits. It was still too early for lunch. Jaime prudely told us about his Peterson 44. It meant nothing to me. Chris and I both acted like we were interested, wanting to please him. I looked at her a few times and it was easy to understand how she was feeling. However, he caught her attention when he mentioned that we would be staying in the main cabin and he and Marisol would be opposite. "I'm very sorry, but this doesn't suit me." She said this in all seriousness. I smiled and Jaime looked a little embarrassed. "I don't even know this person and I don't intend to share a bed or even a room with him. You'll have to come up with something else." Jaime didn't have a quick answer, so I had to intervene. "Don't worry about it. I can use the master bathroom, and I'll have no problem sleeping on the fold-out bed in the galley. I'm sure Miss Chris won't mind me keeping my bag in her room. Is that okay with you?" After I said that, I realized that by using the expression, "Miss Chris," I was making a fool of myself. You need to be careful not to repeat this mistake in the future. Chris went below to settle into her cabin while I wandered around the deck. Jamie and Marisol pulled away from the dock using the auxiliary engine. I had no idea where we were and no idea where we were going, and I didn't care. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew was Marisol calling me to dinner. It looked like most of the dining would be on deck. This suited me quite well. After a light lunch, Jamie opened the small tablet computer. What we do know is that they asked the woman at the car rental place for directions to David. Chris sank into her chair, sighed, and said, "Damn. Mr. Mantle, your wife, Jody Terrell, came on the same flight from Philadelphia and also rented a car. We don't know anything else. Marisol, do you have a cold beer? Miss Everett, your ex-husband, Anthony Krupe, and several friends arrived in Panama City last night and rented a car this morning. That's it. I couldn't think of anything smarter." 30 minutes later, Jaime and Marisol were raising the sails, and soon we were racing at full speed into the open ocean. Chris spent the rest of the day below, while I lay on the deck enjoying the sun and wind, and finally I got my cold beer. For the next 3 days, everything was calm. I slept in the galley, Chris occupied the master bedroom, and Jaime and Marisol shared the forward cabin. I tried to be helpful, helping Jaime whenever I could. Chris helped Marisol, but prepared some of the dishes herself. She was great at brunch-type dinners. Nobody complained. She seemed comfortable in the kitchen and the living room. I spent most of my free time on deck, except in the rain. It rained almost every day, but not all day. When we weren't sailing, Jaime would find a few quiet coves and bays to moor the boat for a while. I caught a few fish, but had no idea what kind of fish they were. All I knew was that they were pretty tasty. Chris spent time on deck, but usually wore a light blanket. She had a one-piece swimsuit that was skimpy and seemed a little old-fashioned for her. Unlike Jody, Chris was short and stocky. She was not fat, but quite well-fed. I found it interesting, but not erotic. You know, a little sun would help you maintain that beautiful tan. It was a weak attempt on my part to be friendly. It's not a tan, idiot. The sun ages the skin and is the main cause of melanoma. I'd rather cover up than look like an old woman with tanned skin. It was unexpected. Her skin had a golden sheen to it, and I just assumed it was from a normal tan. She must have really been Mediterranean. Tomorrow I'll try a different approach. Everything was quiet and serene. Who am I kidding? It was damn boring. By the end of the week, Chris was finally warming up. The conversations were short and meaningless, but they were conversations. That evening, after dinner, we were on deck, and she decided to open up a little. "Mickey, why are you here? What made you sign a contract with the PPA? Since I decided to live in David and not in Boca, I feel a little out of place. You all know each other up there. It should work both ways. Let's put it this way. You tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. But first, I need to know one thing." "Yes. What exactly? What is your real name?" "We're not supposed to talk, but to hell with it. My name is Carla." "Great. You can call me John." I find it funny to respond to Mickey. Carla reached into the refrigerator and got us both a new bottle of beer. "I won't bore you with the long story. I got married about 8 years ago in Westchester to the son of an old family friend. I guess you could call it an arranged marriage, although technically it wasn't. My family was well off, and so did his family. Unfortunately, I couldn't have children, so my husband decided he needed to find someone else. Should I continue?" I smiled, nodded, and took a sip of beer. "My family, the Randazzos, were in the municipal construction business. They did all the traffic lights, street lights, storm drains, and other similar projects in 3 counties. It was very profitable. The Krupi family owned 4 restaurants, several pizzerias, and sandwich shops." "How did you end up here?" "My husband Tony just told me he was having a baby with his last girlfriend. He was going to move her into our house while she was pregnant, and they would find a better place to live after the baby was born. He seemed to be very confident in himself. He has always been like this." She brought us 2 more cold ones. I smiled and waited for her to continue. "I burned down the house, as well as 3 cars. Then I burned down the largest of Krupi's restaurants, and finally I cleaned out all the bank accounts, including savings and investments. 2 days later I was here. We sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying our beer. Okay, John, now it's your turn. My wife, Jody, and I met when we were kids. We grew up together and got into trouble all the time. She loved every minute of it. Her mantra was, 'You always regret the things you don't do,' and she lived it that way. Over time, we got married and had 3 children. I started my own construction business, which grew very well. Every chance we got, we did something adventurous and exciting. When the children grew up, she got a little bored and decided to set up one of her own adventures. The nature of the project she had chosen meant that I could not go with her, and, unfortunately, she could not discuss it with me." Carla handed me a new cold beer. "I think I see where this is going. I'm no computer whiz, but I had no trouble figuring it out. It really bothered me. I don't know what was worse, knowing what she was going to do, or knowing that she was keeping it a secret from me. We shared everyone's lives, and now it had to happen. As I understand it, you waited until she left before finishing everything?" "Yes. I gave my business to my employees in exchange for a share in future profits and took a good chunk of our savings, but not all. I left her the house and everything else." "Are you sure she did what you think she did?" "No. I don't want to know, and I don't need to know more than I know. I don't need this grief. Have you heard anything about her since then?" "Nope." We sat in silence for a while, and then Carla excused herself and went to bed. That night, I slept on the deck. The next day, some kind of storm broke out. By dinner, it got really bad. Jaime and Marisol spent quite a bit of time setting up ropes or anchors, or something similar to prepare for the night. They seemed to know what they were doing, so I felt calm. All I could think about were the lyrics from an old Queen song. "Thunder and lightning, very, very scary. Galileo, Galileo." I don't know what was worse, the bright flashes of lightning or the loud peals of thunder. It was hard to fall asleep, and it didn't help that Carla kept shaking me. What the hell do you want? This is a really bad storm, John. Come down to the cabin with me, quickly. It's okay. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Go back to bed. I'm not worried about you, asshole. I'm worried about myself. Get your ass to the cabin now. She pulled my hand. I spent the rest of the night holding her. Most of the time, she pulled the blanket over her head. By the next morning, everything was quiet and calm. I woke up with a breast in my hand and a raging excitement. She seemed to be awake and aware of both states, but did not know what to do and simply lay there motionless. As smoothly as I could, I moved my butt away and removed my hand. I had no idea how it ended up under her nightgown. As we settled down on the bed, she turned to face me. Thank you, John. I needed this. She slid off the bed and went into the control room. I had no idea what she meant. I fell over the side of the bunk with relief. Carla was very friendly for the rest of the day. Jamie and Marisol enjoyed making us feel awkward about our night together. The comments and jokes didn't stop all day. In fact, it seems that Carla herself gave reasons for this a couple of times. I was more embarrassed than she was. In the evening, after a few glasses of beer on deck, Carla took my hand, and we went to the cabin together. We barely slept that night. It was a new experience for me. My first woman besides Jody. It was different and, at the same time, the same. It's hard to describe, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't feel any guilt. Unfortunately, it was also our last night aboard the Yankee Clipper. On the way home, our driver told us the latest news. It looks like Jody left broke after a week and returned home. Carla's husband, however, simply disappeared along with his two companions. They found a rental car in the middle of nowhere, but with no passengers. We dropped Carla off at her apartment and I was home within an hour. The first person I met the next morning was Billie Jean King. She spent most of the week with Jody while I was gone. Jody spent a couple of days showing my photo around town. It didn't take her long to realize that I was now Mickey Mantle. Apart from the guys from the PPA, no one hid anything about me. They simply didn't have any information to give her other than my address. When she realized I wasn't coming back, she gave up and left. She didn't say much, but she told Billie Jean that I left because she screwed up. That's all she said. Doesn't sound like much of an explanation, but then again, it was secondhand. However, if she really thought so, then my leaving was the right choice. Things went pretty normally for the next few months, except that I spent 2 or 3 days a week in David and Carla, spent a couple of days a week in Boca. There was never any deep emotional attachment between us. It was just a good friendship. In the end, she decided that I was not going to move to David and found us a bigger and better apartment in Boca, and we teamed up. Carla decided to take up watercolor painting, and I took up sports seriously. So serious that Willie Mays, Sandy Koufax, and I decided to open our own gym. A gym, so to speak. This was a fun little project. A whole group of expats in the area had unused exercise equipment sitting around. It's funny how people buy these things without realizing that they don't help if you don't use them. In a short time, we had more simulators than we needed. More than half of them were not gym grade, and we ended up having to throw them away. Nobody seemed offended by this. They just wanted to get rid of them. Monica Seles was very happy that we were open so she could start yoga and Zumba classes. We charged a small monthly fee to cover rent, utilities, and insurance. Things were going well at the gym, and Carla was delighted with her painting. However, everything else was not so rosy. PPA has turned into a ball of worms. Hector tried his best to make everything work, but it was too difficult. Several guys had problems with their passports. The tax situation was confusing. In addition, difficulties with banking transactions could confuse anyone. After several group meetings, it was decided to abandon the program. Everyone agreed with this except Joe DiMaggio. Hector agreed to make an exception for him. It took a couple of weeks, but eventually everyone had new driver's licenses and bank accounts. Our old passports were still in order. The only downside now was that we would be easier to find. We still retained Hector as our legal advisor and trustee. We also kept our emergency suitcases just in case. A year has passed, and I didn't even notice it. The checks still came every month. They varied in amount. but were always more than sufficient. The good news was that Carla had much more money than me, and she didn't skimp. We lived a good life and lacked for nothing. I have not had any contact with Jody or my sons since I last called them. The next 6 months were quite active. One day I came home to find Carla sitting on the porch with a stranger. Michael Randazzo came from Westchester to spend the week with his daughter. They haven't spoken since she left. Her mother was unable to come due to heart problems. I felt a little uneasy, but he quickly calmed me down. He was truly grateful that his daughter was happy and cared for. I felt a little uneasy, especially since I was almost 20 years older than her. Over the next week, Michael and I spent several hours together. He apologized for letting the problem with Carla's husband get out of hand. He never said it, but I got the idea that Anthony Krupe never returned to the States and never will. I didn't ask for an explanation. It was his monkey and his circus. He tried to get the charges against Carla dropped, but was unsuccessful. He also asked me about my marital status and seemed genuinely interested in my answer. The week passed quickly. Carla was happy, and that only made me feel better. Before leaving, he took me aside. "John, Carla needs to see her mother. She can't come back like Carla Krupe, but she can do it like Carla Terrell. Think about it." I interpreted this as his approval. 6 weeks later, I received another surprise. My son Greg arrived. "You're hard to find, Dad, but not impossible. Sorry for not keeping in touch, but I assume you know the situation." "Actually, Dad, none of us know. We tried everything, but Mom refuses to tell us anything. She only says that it was her fault and nothing more. It's been over a year now, and I haven't heard anything from her. She showed up over a year ago, and I avoided her the whole time she was here. I was still too limp at that time." "From what, Dad? Are you going to give us a hint?" "No, I've already said too much. Now, what the hell are you doing here?" "Do you know where Boca del Toro is?" "Of course. It's about 5 hours north of here." "What?" "I bought 50% of the dive shop. I'm here to do all the paperwork. I'll be moving in next month." "What is your mother doing?" "She was pretty depressed for a while. Then she found a new job. She works in the junior high school cafeteria. She tried to sell the house, but couldn't without your signature, so she rented it out and rented an apartment. We talked to her about. She got a better job, but she got upset and told us to mind our own business. Between the rent she gets for the house and her salary, I think she's doing okay." At that moment, Carla entered. It was obvious that she lived here, and none of us thought about hiding it. "Hi, you must be Greg. John talks a lot about you." Greg was surprised, and it showed on his face. Carla laughed. "It's okay, Greg. Just consider me your dad's housekeeper. Who wants a beer?" She knew how to melt the ice. Greg suddenly felt comfortable in this situation. We talked a little more, and then went to dinner. Before Greg left for the States, I gave him a power of attorney so Jody could sell the house. A month later, he returned to start his new business. I haven't had any contact with the business since I left. That was the plan. The checks kept coming, and I had no reason to pry into it. After a few months, I noticed that my monthly contributions to the company had increased significantly. I left Gary Jones in charge of the company and felt it was time to test him. "Gary, this is John." "Damn, it's high time. You've been gone for almost 2 years. What's going on?" "I was going to ask you the same question. I saw a big jump in my monthly checks and I was curious. Is there anything I should know about?" "A couple of months ago, we were visited by a company from Philadelphia called Empire Industries. Have you ever heard of them?" "Of course I've heard of them. Empire Industries was owned by the Randazzo family. All this must have happened shortly after I met Carla's father." "Yes, I heard about them. I know one of the owners, Michael Randazzo. What happened to lead to this?" "They explained to us that they had a lot of different jobs coming up that didn't fit into their normal business. They wanted to subcontract the jobs and ask it if we were interested. We didn't see anything wrong with the offer, so we agreed to give it a try for a period of time. 90 days. It worked out great for use. We had a lot of new work in Chester and Montgomery counties, and I had to hire 12 more people. I also had to buy 3 more trucks and some other equipment. Is everything under control or do you need help? John, everything is fine, but we would like you to come back. I haven't had a single day off since you left. I could use a week on the shore. We both laughed a little at his suggestion. Gary, let me think for a moment. I'll call you back. I could hear him smirking on the other end of the line. Gary, did Jody come in at all? To be honest, John, she was only here once. About a week after you left, she showed up. I explained to her that you were no longer associated with the company, as you told me. I know she wanted to know more, but couldn't bring herself to ask. She didn't cry or get upset. She looked a little sad. We didn't see her again. That evening, I had a light but serious conversation with Carla, and she swore that she knew nothing about what her dad had done. However, she thought it was funny. Months passed, and everything went well. I got a surprise at Christmas when Terry showed up. Greg shared everything with both of his brothers, but carefully hid most of it from his mother. Of course, she knew where I was, and I'm sure she suspected Greg and I were hooking up since he was in Panama, too. He just never shared anything with her, and she never asked. Terry spent 2 days with me and Carla in Boca, and the rest of the time in Boca's del Toro with Greg. Greg promised to help him recertify in scuba diving while he was here. Terry brought 2 things that Jody wanted him to give to me. The first was a check for $210,000, my share from the sale of the house. It was her decision, not mine. The second thing was the final decision on divorce. There was no letter, no explanation, no message, only 2 envelopes. When he left, I had no message or letter for him to pick up. A curtain. I didn't regret anything. 2 months later, Carla Terrell received a new passport and was traveling with her new husband to visit her mother. It was a round-trip ticket. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Third story. Breast stimulation can activate the same area of the brain as regular sex in some women, according to research. This explains why a small percentage of women are able to experience pleasure from this alone. In general, the reactions of the female body are very diverse, and individual differences play an important role. It is important to respect each woman's preferences and needs. You're probably wondering what all of the above information has to do with me. Until I was 28 and married for 2 years. The other important thing is that I had a reason to be highly motivated to find out this information. I need to bore you a little with my past for some of my story to make sense. I grew up in a rough area. I had a lot of fights, and few of them I lost. Many fights took place over the defense of my younger brother, whom I loved very much because he is gay, and this was not very well received in society. I probably would have ended up in jail, but when I dropped out of high school my senior year, I met a guy named John who changed my life. Well, maybe met is not the right word. I tried to rob him because he was clearly over 60, and he couldn't have weighed more than 65 kilograms, while I weighed 90 kilograms. We had a fight with him. Afterwards, he asked, "What is your name?" I wasn't going to answer, but when he raised his foot as if to kick me again, I blurted out, "Tom Skindler." "Did you drop out of school?" "Yes." "Tom, I'm going to give you a choice. I will either call the police right now and have you arrested, or you promise me to come to my gym tomorrow for testing and training. What do you choose?" "How do you know that I will appear?" "Because I'm going to look at your ID, and if you don't show up, I'm going to come get you. Next time, I won't be gentle with you." Was it gentle this time? I thought, as my whole body hurt. "I'll go to the gym," I said. "You're not as dumb as you look," John chuckled. "Here is my business card. Be there tomorrow between 13 and 14. Now show me your ID." In short, his gym trained both boxers and MMA fighters. He gave me a job as a janitor and free MMA training on the condition that I get my JED. When I turned 18, he scheduled several fights for me. Although after training my natural weight was 80 kilograms, I fought at welterweight. I won my first 4 matches, drew with the 23rd ranked welterweight in the world, then lost to the 14th and 17th ranked #1 welterweights. John was honest with me. Tom, you received your matriculation certificate. You are a good citizen and no longer a punk. But you will never be in the top 10 MMA fighters. You're also much smarter than the average fighter. Act to junior college and make something of yourself. I did as I was told, received an associate's degree in engineering and then a bachelor's degree in engineering from one of the top 2 public universities in my state, graduating at the age of 24. I met my future wife Bonnie right after graduating from college. She is a year older than me and was in her 3rd year of law school when we met. I think I need to describe us physically. Both she and I have slightly prettier faces than average. I have a few small scars, but they just add character. We both look good in clothes, although we wouldn't immediately throw anyone off, although her legs are much taller than average. Where we both shine in terms of appearance is our naked upper body. Her two-tone eyes really highlight her character. She has one dark blue iris and one bright green iris. Although she has colored contact lenses that she can use depending on the situation, I like it when she doesn't. For some reason, I find her two-tone eyes exotic, and she seems to really appreciate it. Another thing I liked about Bonnie was her friends. It seems like a lot of women have girlfriends who make life difficult for their boyfriends. Not Bonnie. I liked all her friends. In fact, her best friend Julie is just as bubbly and cheerful as Bonnie. She is also very sweet, and is as kind and sweet as any woman I have ever met in my life. Bonnie introduced me to her about 2 weeks after I met Bonnie, and Julie and I became great friends independent of Bonnie. In fact, Julie became probably the best friend I've ever had. There was one problem with Julie, however. One day I saw her in a bikini, and I was amazed by her curves, especially her sculpted cream-colored hips. It took about 2 weeks to get those hips out of my head. It took me about 6 months to convince Bonnie to become exclusive. She finally agreed, and we got married shortly before I turned 26, and she had just turned 27. Julie was her maid of honor, and my brother was my best man. Bonnie, perhaps because of her legal background, chooses her words very carefully. I call this parsing, but perhaps that is the wrong term. In any case, as far as I know, she never lied about anything important, but I had to think carefully about what exactly she said. I knew her telling a subordinate, "You did a hell of a job," which meant, "You're about to get fired." When we were sitting in her parents' friend's living room, and an older gentleman with terrible hair asked her if she liked his new wig, she smiled and said, "You've got a nice bouffant there," which I later convinced her to admit was a reference to his floor covering, not his creepy wig. Even though I have an engineering background, I am far from being the sharpest tool in the shed, and rarely catch Bonnie's dissection unless it is somehow brought to my attention. This involved the vows she wrote for our wedding. They included what became the relevant part: "I'll only sleep with you as long as we're married." We got married by the decision of the magistrate. I am not sure that the average priest, minister, or rabbi would agree to affirm this oath. I had just turned 28 and was thoroughly enjoying my family life when some fly in the ointment appeared. None of the events or situations on their own were enough to make me suspicious of Bonnie, but when put together, I couldn't help but wonder. Bonnie insisted, and in fact, she was obsessed with it, visiting the fitness club early in the morning 4 days a week. It didn't matter what time we went to bed. She had to be there by 7 a.m. At several parties we went to, she had a strange look on her face when she came out of the toilet. She always immediately changed the topic of conversation on her cell phone or disconnected from it when I was nearby while she was discussing something. Sometimes she would return home from going to the bar after work a little disheveled, although she never came later than the time she promised to be home, and we almost always had dinner together. I checked her laundry in the wash and looked for other signs of an affair, but found nothing. Still, it bothered me, so after about 4 months of doubt, I ran into her one night in bed. I wasn't belligerent or nasty in any way, just curious. With a wide smile on her face, and without any visible anxiety, Bonnie said, "What are you doing, little devil? You're jealous, aren't you?" "Jealous of whom?" "Jealous of some imaginary lover," she giggled. "Do I have reason to worry?" Her smile became devilish. "Tom, I swear to you that while we are married, I will not be with any man other than you. If I ever get tired of you, which is damn unlikely," she continued with an evil laugh, "I'll let you know." I wanted to believe Bonnie. I really wanted to. I truly loved being married to her, and I loved everything about her. But I had a bone in my ass, and I couldn't deal with it. Then something unexpected happened. Julie came to visit me. Bonnie was a bridesmaid when Julie got married about 6 months after us to a guy named Ralph. Julie moved about an hour away shortly after she married Ralph, and we didn't see much of her or Ralph anymore. It wasn't a big loss for me that we couldn't see Ralph. He's a big, nasty guy who thinks his shit doesn't stink, but I really missed Julie. Bonnie and Julie talked on the phone or emailed every other day or so, and Julie and I talked or emailed at least once a week. I was sincerely sorry that we could no longer see her often. Julie came to stay, thankfully, without her husband for the long weekend. Besides the fact that I couldn't wait to see my best friend, I was glad that she came for another reason. She did not tolerate alcohol well. I knew Bonnie had told her everything, and if I got Julie drunk, I hoped I could get the information I needed out of her. We had a party for Julie the second night she was with us, mostly with people Julie knew from college and from living near us. Everyone was having a good time. I danced a few dances with Julie and brought her drinks whenever she wanted them, always double, and in one case even triple. By about 11, she was really tipsy. "Listen, Julie," I said, handing her another daiquiri, "you look like you could use some fresh air. Let's go out to the patio, it's a good night." I won't try to imitate the slurredness of her words, but they were garbled. "Of course, handsome," she giggled as I led her to a small sofa on our patio, big enough for two, but not much more. After talking about some things that I thought were stupid, but that interested Julie, I began my subtle interrogation. "Tell me, Julie, why didn't you warn me about Bonnie's unusual sexual proclivities before I married her?" Her face became serious. "Have you got any problems?" she asked. "Hell no," I laughed. "Not at all. Some of them are just a little surprising." "Yes, some people are surprised," she laughed. "Yes, that's exactly true. When did you first learn about them?" "I realized this a month after I met her in my first year of college. For a while, every day was different for her." I thought. "Did you ever think that she would refuse this?" I asked. "No, stupid. She won't give it up. She will not refuse this," flashed through my head. Julie's expression began to change from amused to serious, probably in response to the unconscious frown on my face. However, I quickly gave up. Smiling, I continued, "Well, it's harmless, so I don't mind. Although I don't think she would let anyone else do that to her." "Of course not, stupid. Of course, you're right." I managed to get some more information from Julie before Bonnie walked out onto the patio. "Why are you two here? Not dancing or hanging out with Julie's old college buddies?" She giggled. "Julie just wanted to get some fresh air," I chuckled. "I think I prepared 2 strong drinks for her." I helped Julie to her feet, and we walked back into the house hand in hand with Bonnie, and I continued to pretend that I was having a good time. Even though I had given up double-strength drinks, Julie passed out about an hour after returning to the party. I asked Bonnie if I should take her to the bed in the guest room, and she was all for it. "Do you need any help?" she asked. "No, no problem just getting her into bed with her clothes on, right?" I answered. "Take off her blouse and skirt, but don't take off her bra or panties. Don't touch any of the merchandise, dude, okay?" Bonnie giggled. "Got it," I replied. I picked Julie up with ease, which seemed to surprise Bonnie and several other guests, and carried her to the guest room. "I hope it's okay that I put you to bed, Julie," I said with a grin. "You weren't yourself, and you really need to get some sleep." Again, I will not attempt to reproduce her garbled speech. "Tom, I like you much more than Ralph. Sometimes he acts like a jerk. Do you think if we asked Bonnie, she would let you sleep with me. After a shocked pause, I was quite sure that in her current state, she would not be able to read the surprise on her face. I replied, "Perhaps it would not be such a good idea. But I really like you, Julie. You are wonderful. Now get some sleep." With these words, I kissed her forehead, covered her with a sheet, turned off the light, and left the room. Interesting, I thought, leaving the room. Depending on how things pan out in the near future, this could be very interesting. I thought back to all of my past relationships with Julie, and for the first time I foolishly realized that what I had interpreted as harmless flirting on her part was probably something more at some point. Not that I would change anything I did based on this, but who knows? The next day, Julie seemed distressed in my presence and seemed to avoid eye contact. She must have remembered what she told me. I tried to be as cheerful and sociable in her presence as I could. However, I had conflicts with Bonnie, and I was on my heels. I wondered if she still had a group of guys. The night Julie visited us for the last time, Bonnie had to run errands after dinner. As soon as she left, Julie walked shyly towards me, wringing her hands. "I'm really sorry, Tom. I hope I didn't embarrass you too much with what I told you last night in the guest room. I would never do anything to come between you and Bonnie." "Hey, don't think about it, Julie," I whispered, squeezing her hands. "You're a great friend. Water rushes over the dam." She looked somewhat relieved, but continued. I also hope I didn't tell you anything you didn't already know about Bonnie on the patio. I'm not sure exactly what I said, but I'm worried." I interrupted her and squeezed her hands again. "Don't overthink it. Nothing you said was news to me," I lied. "However, I have one concern. It's your comment about Ralph acting like a jerk sometimes. Sit down and tell me about it." We sat next to each other on the living room couch, and I continued to hold her hands. Maybe I calmed her down by holding her hands. Maybe she was desperate. Whatever it was, she opened up to me. By the time Bonnie returned 15 minutes later, I had learned some disturbing things and was convinced that I really didn't like Ralph. As soon as Bonnie walked into the garage, I looked Julie straight in the eye and said, "If I can ever help with Ralph, let me know. I'm serious. There are things in my background that allow me to handle any physical situation, so don't hesitate to call." The last statement obviously came as a surprise to her. Once I got to college, I didn't tell anyone about my MMA experience, not even Bonnie. To them, I was just a regular guy, when in reality, any real welterweight MMA fighter can beat the crap out of 99% of the guys on the street, no matter their size, and I was no exception. Following the information I received from Julie, I did the research I talked about at the beginning of this story. It took me a couple of days on the internet and 2 phone conversations with recognized sex experts to put it all together. When I finished, it felt like a veil had been lifted from my face. I had no idea this was possible. I needed to test Bonnie to know for sure. After Bonnie's secret research, I had one set of answers I needed. Now, to answer my second set of questions, I needed to find out what was going on with Bonnie and the others. I decided not to argue with her. What was more important to me was the high likelihood that other guys would get the opportunity to be with her. The first thing on my mind was her tendency to parse her words and her statement to me that no one would ever sleep with her while we were married. Apparently, she avoided saying anything about getting pleasure in other ways. I, however, could not understand where she would do this. Certainly not at work, as her career was very important to her, and the last thing she needed was to be fired from her junior legal position for acting inappropriately on the job. She was with me almost every evening and most weekends. The winnowing process left only the health club and her infrequent trips to the bar with her coworkers. First, I dealt with a health club. I hired a female private investigator who joined Bonnie's health club and worked out exactly when Bonnie did. After just a week, 4 sessions, she had a worrying report. According to the private investigator, at the end of each session, Bonnie and the male trainer or client went into a separate room for training. They came out 15 or 20 minutes later with smiles on their faces and looking more disheveled and sweaty than when they entered the room. I asked a private investigator to install a camera in this room that would only turn on when Bonnie was in the room. You know that you can't use what's caught on camera in court, right? She told me. I will never tell anyone that I have anything from the camera. I'm just using it to my advantage, I replied. By the end of the next week, I had what I needed. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was what I needed. None of them had any internal contact with her, but for some reason that didn't bring me much comfort. I loved Bonnie, and I loved being married to her, so I carefully chose how to proceed. I decided it was best to take a two-pronged approach. First, deal with the guys to scare them and others away, and then confront Bonnie and force her to change her behavior. I acted quickly. Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after I received the video footage from the private investigator, I went to Jake's apartment. There was a fight. When I returned home, Bonnie was in shock. "What happened to you, honey?" she asked, stroking the bruise on my cheek. "Oh, I met Jake, that guy you mess around with on Mondays." Her face turned ashen gray for a few seconds and her jaw dropped. After about 10 seconds, she pulled herself together and answered, "What are you talking about?" "You know, dear. Or do you have so many lovers that you can't remember them?" This time, when the color drained from her face, she did not come to her senses, but collapsed into a chair. "We're going to talk a little, Bonnie. I guess technically it wasn't true. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen. You either go along with it or get out. Is it clear?" She looked startled and wide-eyed, but nodded her head. "Yes." "First of all, why don't you tell me about your quirks and preferences? Secondly, why lie to me? Third, why are you looking for it from other guys and not getting it from me?" I asked with noticeable irritation in my voice. She was silent for a long time before answering. Long enough for me to say, "Well," twice before she finally answered. I I didn't want you to think I was strange. I just wanted to make you happy. I I let other guys do it because it made me feel really good, and I didn't think it would hurt you since you're the only one who slept with me," she said between sobs. I asked around a little more, but got nothing more from her. Either she really was telling the truth and was emotionally devastated, or I was never going to get that out of her, so I gave it up. "Let me tell you what's about to happen. First, you are leaving your current gym immediately." When she lowered her eyes to the ground again, I continued. "Secondly, you'll figure out a way to make me feel comfortable enough to trust you again, and if you do that, I won't beat the crap out of Bill and Kurt. If you don't figure out a way, we'll break up and I'll give them a good whack. If you want to get a divorce, we can do it right now, and you can let every guy you meet do what you want." "I don't want to leave," she cried. Then she tried to approach me. I pushed her away with my outstretched hand. "Then you have a week to figure out how to trust me with you." She nodded her head dejectedly. "Yes." "What do you want me to make you for dinner? And then you want to watch a movie?" "Yes, please," she answered timidly. "I should have everything ready in an hour," I said. "She's a harkala upstairs, and I heard water running in the bathroom." That evening, we talked about everything except our problem and, huddled together, watched a movie that I let her choose. I know she called her friends to warn them about me. When I went to the health club she went to regularly on Wednesday and asked about Flint, I was told he no longer worked there. I asked about Jake and was told he had an accident and wouldn't be back until the following Monday. On Sunday, Bonnie surprised me with what she came up with to solve my trust issues. She suggested something and I agreed. For the next 6 months, everything went well. I really don't know why she didn't tell me about her preferences in bodily pleasures earlier. I didn't mind and I was happy because it also gave me great pleasure. I had to go on a rare business trip for one night, actually 3 nights. I was wondering if I should trust her. She said that all the time except for work, she would be waiting for me at home. Early Tuesday afternoon, while still traveling, I received a frantic call from Julie on my cell phone. The last few times I talked to her on the phone, it seemed like something was bothering her, but she denied it when I asked about it and tried to seem cheerful. "Tom," she said with despair in her voice, "you said you would help me if I needed it." I asked, "I'm afraid of Ralph. In fact, he has become angry lately, and I don't know what to expect. Do you think I could stay with you and Bonnie for a few days? Certainly. Did you call Bonnie? I can't reach her either in the office or on my cell phone. She's at some meeting outside the office. Besides, Ralph has my car, and his car is in the workshop. Could you come pick me up? She answered even more excitedly. I'm on a business trip, but it's in the same direction from my house as yours, and only an hour's drive from you. Let me check and call you back right away, I answered sincerely. I consulted with my supervisor, who was with me on the trip. Everything went very well, and if I completed one more task, it would only take about 45 minutes he could do without me, even if he didn't like it. I explained that this was truly an emergency, and he agreed. I called Julie back and told her the news. Please hurry, was her sincere response. I completed the task in exactly 42 minutes and asked my boss to pick up my suitcase from the motel room and bring it with me. I went to Julie's house. When I got there, I was surprised when she didn't open the door right away. I knocked for a good 2 minutes before I heard her voice inside. Hello, Tom. Thanks for coming, but this is a false alarm. I'll call you tomorrow, I heard her weak voice from the other side of the front door. This definitely didn't look like Julie. She was in trouble. I said, okay, but call again if you need me. Then I went to my car, drove 3 houses away and parked. I managed to save her from Ralph. Julie was desperate. She had already packed her things, so we just took her 2 suitcases and a few other things and headed to my house. On the way, I tried unsuccessfully to call Bonnie. We returned home around 6:30 p.m. I was surprised Bonnie wasn't there, especially since her car was in the garage. I also parked in the garage and did not turn on the outside lights. I quickly made Julie dinner and then insisted she get some sleep. She didn't argue. She was emotionally and physically exhausted. When Bonnie arrived around 8 p.m., it was obvious that she had cheated on me again. I'm not going to hunt down the assholes this time. I'm throwing you out. It's all over between us. With these words, I began to pack 2 suitcases for her. Julie woke up from the noise and walked into our room with her eyes wide open. After Bonnie cried into Julie's shoulder and then asked Julie about her condition, I heard them talking in hushed voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could sense the worry in their voices. Just as I finished packing the second suitcase, I heard Bonnie screaming and calling Julie names. I could not believe it. I pushed Julie into the guest room and told her to lock the door. Then I took both of Bonnie's suitcases in one hand and pulled her along with me with the other while she screamed, "Sorry, Tom. We'll get through this. I love you," and other nonsense. I didn't say a word as I put her bags in the trunk of her car, sat her in the driver's seat, and handed her the keys. Only then did I speak. My lawyer will call you at the office. You can come back here in 3 days. By then, I'll be out of here and find another place. Don't come back early because the locks will be changed. Bonnie sobbed as she backed down the driveway. I closed the garage door and then stormed back into the house, cursing. I sat down at the kitchen table and started crying myself because I knew my marriage was over. Suddenly, Julie appeared. Is it over with you and Bonnie? She asked with an expression that was difficult to read. Yes, absolutely, definitely, I answered. She smiled. Why did Bonnie yell at you? I asked. Because I told her that she was a fool and that if you finished with her, then I would come after you with everything I have. I'm not stupid. If you're free, I'll kick Ralph to the curb in a heartbeat. A truly devilish grin appeared on her face. Are you free? She asked. Everything happened quickly. Julie offered to talk to the district attorney to reduce the charges against Ralph if he fully cooperated in her divorce proceedings against him. A couple of times he tried to make peace, but she just laughed at him. Sorry. Why would I come back to you when I now have a man whom I have adored with unrequited love for the last 5 years? She told him in my presence. Interesting, I thought. Bonnie also tried to make peace, but I told her straight up that I was sorry that things turned out the way they did, but I couldn't put up with her cheating anymore. I just didn't trust her. You just want to replace me with Julie, she snapped at one point. Both Julie and I found other jobs. We sold both houses and split the proceeds with our ex-spouses. We moved to a city 3 hours away by car from where Bonnie and I used to live. On our first wedding anniversary, Julie and I found out she was pregnant. "What would you do if I tried to steal you from Bonnie before you married her?" she asked, stroking my cheek. "I would probably leave her gently and marry you," I replied with a grin. "Good answer," she grinned. "I'm sorry I didn't try," she said after a pause, now with a tear in one eye. "Now we are together. That's all that matters," I replied. Then I kissed her. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story. Perfect.